Good morning. That's it. That's the last thing I'm saying. No, I'm just kidding. I'm gonna listen to some news and comedy and stuff and get my video riddled with ads in the future. So whatever. Actually, I gotta watch him. I can't listen to him. Let's just put some music. Roman military technology and tactics. I could listen to that, I think.
2,000 years ago, the Roman army is the best equipped army in the world. While the architects have mastered the art of manipulating stone and concrete, military engineers have fashioned metal and wood to create devastating weapons of war. The Roman foot soldier's main weapon is a fearsome sword called a gladius, a double-edged blade about 18 inches long.
This sounds really hokey.
It was used for stabbing and thrusting rather than slashing. But if a sword could be deadly at close quarters, their spear, called a pilum,
might be accurate though,
could kill from a distance. It can be thrown with lethal accuracy around 100 feet.
The pilum's designed basically to kill. It's designed to pierce people, to pierce armor, to pierce their shields.
Alright, now this is a torch. I don't want the orange part to get dyed. So I need to like...
The pilum has a 6-foot-long wooden shaft, topped with a 2-foot-long iron shank. The tip of the shank was triangular, and would have been difficult to remove once it impaled the enemy.
Alpha needs to subtract this.
The drawback of any javelin-type weapon is that the enemy may pick it up and throw it back. But Roman military scientists employ the latest metal-making technology to protect their men. The iron tip of the pilum is tempered through rapid heating and cooling, making it hard and strong.
Yeah, it looks like the orange part there.
The shaft is untempered, leaving it soft.
Yeah, it got like erased.
Striking a shield, the pilum's strong tip penetrates, but the soft shaft bends, making it useless for the enemy to throw it back at the Romans.
This is like, the music. It sounds like a History Channel shit.
Protecting your soldiers.
Let's listen to Lindy Beige. He's someone I can just listen to.
What's a maniple swap? And that is a good question, because
actually, you know what is really... I found a really good channel, but it's more D&D stuff. But it's really cool. It's like animated, though.
Roman soldiers. I'm going to be talking principally about the period around the Second
I don't really care about
the
military of the Romans swapping units. So let's see what else he's got. Where was I in the medieval weapons tutorial? Yeah, tutorial. Weapons and armor playlist. Probably way down.
This video is about that slightly mysterious thing, the Renaissance period pike, the pike and shot period pike.
Okay, sides again. I think I was up to here. Bastard swords.
Yes, that's right. I'm finally holding what a lot of you consider to be a proper sword. You know, like a knight's sword, in like knights in armor in the olden days used and that. You can see that it's the standard European late medieval sword. It has a straight, tapering blade, long, straight or not far off straight quillons, and unusually for a sword, a weighted pommel. This one is a one-handed sword. You can tell because the grip really is only made for one hand. I can, however, put a second hand on the pommel. That works fine. But it's not really designed for that primary use. Now, I'm not a fan of this style of sword. Waving this about now, this doesn't feel, to me, right. However, we don't really know all that much about how.
So it looks like all the weapons are going to need to have this collar thing
I'm going to guess,
added individually.
Did use them for a fair while, and quite a lot of people use them. That it's just that there's something I don't know about how these swords were used. If I were fighting with a shield, I don't think this is the sort of sword
it's just an axe. That should be all I need to do.
But it would depend on what my opponent's using. So unless I know exactly what these were for, I'm not going to say whether it's good or bad. The fact, though, that they were used by lots of people for lots of time does suggest that they couldn't have been rubbish, could they? Now, this design, you'll notice, carries on through to another sword, like this one. To me, this one feels much nicer in the hand. It's thinner, it's a little bit lighter, and it's got a sort of swish to it. you'll notice it's got a much longer handle. It's very easy now for me to put a second hand on. So, what is this? In the first Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rulebook, I remember that longsword and bastard sword were two separate weapons. But
swords.
Were they? It's debatable. In England, in tournaments, they had separate categories for bastard sword and longsword competitions, suggesting that they were maybe different weapons. But the thing is that there is a continuum. Weapons, swords like this, they have blades that get longer and shorter, and handles that get longer and shorter. And
individual.
This,
mounts.
for instance,
I guess they have to be
very similar size. And
that's too bad.
Some people would call this one a bastard sword or hand and a half sword.
I'm not going to put dyes on the weapons yet, and that's all of the weapons I would have to do.
You know, dispute that.
But torches and stuff have it.
They would say,
might as well check it out.
That's a long sword. But
let's see what's up with the stealing items thing too.
Since there is a continuum of
I don't think I need
sizes,
to make it work
I'm
perfectly,
guessing
but I'd like to just take a
to
look.
what you intend to do with it and who you are. What is your fighting style?
I did fix one other thing real quick this morning, I think.
Up against what opponents are you going? And where are you from as well? The bastard sword seems to be something of an English thing. We don't get many references, hardly any references in Europe to it. And yet, in England, quite definitely, people were using bastard swords. Now, a bastard sword and a hand and a half sword are the same thing. You can use it either in one hand or in two. So some people would imagine then that sometimes you would use one of these with a shield. But actually that's not what they're talking about. You can use it in two hands, and as you're fighting, you can, perhaps to get a bit more reach, go to one hand and then come back to two hands. So you'd be not using a shield, you would be fighting with it, using it two-handed, and then swapping just every now and then. You could do quite a bit of a cheats move. You could go ha-ha like that and get a bit more reach than you could get if you're still holding it with two hands. So it's a bit of a surprise move. It's a technique thing, the bastard sword. And certain sizes of sword would suit certain people for use in that way. But there's no point at which a long sword, also sometimes referred to as war sword or knight sword, there's so many confusing terms, they're all largely interchangeable. Now this one, you see, is definitely longer, and I would not call this a bastard sword because in one hand this feels really feeble. I don't have the control over it, I don't have the power. If I started a swing with two hands on it and then went to one hand, I could, though I'd be very vulnerable, I could get a bit of extra reach and do someone some damage and hope then to recover quickly and go back to two hands.
Hey,
but this feels more like a long sword to me than a bastard sword because of the weight of it. And swords that are, again, this same shape get longer again, and the supposed limit is here, just under your arm. If you stand like that, if it comes up to there, just under your arm, supposedly that's the limit. And when I've handled swords that are that long, I definitely feel that they are two-handed swords. I'm also a little bit tired when people correct me when I say two-handed sword, and they say, you mean Zweihander, which is German for two-handed. That doesn't actually solve anything, just the same thing with a different name. There's another sword called the Great Sword, and I made another video about two-handed swords. I suppose I was really talking about the Great Sword. They're the ones with the blunt section there and the second set of quillons, and they are colossal. They usually have handles about this long, and absolutely they are two-handed and only two-handed weapons. This, for me, I would say it's a two-handed weapon, but it's maybe not quite so long and heavy that I would call it a two-handed sword. So for
long
me,
sword, hand and a half, bastard, and this one-handed, two-handed, and great sword, two-handed great sword.
This is a bastard sword. But that's just me.
Oh shit! Wait, didn't I just dye that thing? Maybe I didn't. Maybe it is dyed. It's hard to tell.
Sword.
Doesn't get all of it.
Is not a main battle weapon. You go in with spears, lances, halberds, things like that to kill the opposition. And when things go wrong, you may need a personal defense weapon, and you may find yourself drawing this, which is also your badge of rank because you had to be a noble to be allowed to carry one of these. The knight's sword was useful for dueling, but in battles, it's not your first choice of weapon. You would use something else. But when you did use it, you use it much like a wrestler. This is a crowbar. This is a lever. A lot of treatises tell us this. They show us techniques for how these were used. There's something called half-swording, for instance, when you put your own hand on your own blade, and yes, you can grab a sharp blade. If you grab it reasonably firmly and don't slide your hand up and down, because it's the sliding that cuts you, as long as your hand doesn't move on the blade, you can actually grab a blade, including your opponent's blade, of course, without doing your hand very much damage. In fact, I've seen Mike Loads do his party piece, which he gets a very sharp sword, and he goes along the front row of an audience and he says, "You, sir, will you hold on to the end of that sword as hard as you can, okay?" And, sorry, he does it this way around. He said, "You, sir, will you hold on the handle end?" And he just carries on holding the blade. And then he says to the man, "Okay, pull it out of my hand." And as far as I know, he's still got all his fingers. So you can grab, you can half sword, you can grab your own blade and then use this as a lever. There are lots of wrestling techniques where the quillons get caught on someone's wrist or over their shoulder or somewhere, and then you lever them to the ground using this as a dirty, great crowbar. If you want to hit someone to death, you use an axe, you use a mace, you use something else. If he's in armor, you're not going to do a huge amount of damage usually by hitting him with one of these, but you can get right up to him and you can lever him to the ground if you've got good technique with one of these. And once you've got an armored man on the ground, then you can either stab him through the eye slit with your dagger, or a friend of yours could come along with a halberd or something else and he can bash him for you. The knight's sword. Badge of rank.
I don't want to press direct. I think that's it. Just building. Limited interactables. But why am I doing building here? I think that was supposed to be just.
You'll see a lot of rather unconvincing, rather exotic poses that look a bit poncy, and you think, is that real? Would anyone actually do that? There's one in a lot of the German fencing manuals from the late 19th called Ox, where you stand like this, you see, and you might think, yeah, right, yeah, would you really?
I'm already doing that.
Well, having
tried cast out item and then
people, I would say that I'm not the greatest fan of this position.
Get the building from it.
Stay in this position for any length of time. You can be caught out. It's not a good position for launching an attack.
No, I don't think that's necessary.
It does invite someone to knock sideways the end of your sword. But no one's saying that you should ever stand in that position for any length of time. Indeed, there are people will tell you, don't stand in a position like that for any length of time, because you are offering an opportunity to your thing. Yeah, right. Yeah, would you really? Position for any length of time. Indeed, there are people will tell you, don't stand in a position like that for any length of time, because you are offering an opportunity to your opponent. However, Ox can counter lots of other things. If someone's thrown a combination of blows against me and I've got contact, I've got my sword against his, and he starts coming over the top, I can throw up into Ox, and that will protect me. It's a good counter to a lot of attacks coming in.
Okay, so here
I can
have to do this anyway.
Cut you from here. I can cut you like that. If I cut you that way and fail to get through your defense, I can immediately.
I noticed that the server was spawning like a solid building.
And if
also,
I just tip that cut forwards, can you see that this circle I'm.
Look at this. This looks so much easier to understand after looking at complicated stuff.
Of air in front of me that protects me against pretty much anything. Whatever blow you're throwing at me, if I can make this entire circle before that blow reaches me, I will at some point intercept that blow. So from here, you can do quite a lot of practical things. However, I do so often notice with martial arts of all sorts that you have these beautiful positions.
Reliable.
Well, you decide whether this is beautiful or not. And they sort of go out the window as soon as you have a bout where the two people are trying to beat each other. You'll notice, for instance, that there are karate people who will practice punching like this, and then as soon as they're sparring against an opponent, suddenly they turn into boxers again, and all that formal Shotokan karate goes apparently out of the window. And when I watch bouts between people using these weapons, they've spent ages practicing all their drills and moves from the manuals, and then most of it seems to go out of the window as soon as the practical situation of having to hit someone without yourself being hit turns about. And watching Olympic fencing, for instance.
So server and client should do that as well.
Stick to the classical manuals that much. But that doesn't mean that the classical manuals are useless. You try out
only
the
the
stuff,
client should do
you get it
that.
to work, you understand it,
I'm not sure
Once
if
you've learned the
that's
rule book, then you're in a much better position to throw it away.
really what I want to do. All this stuff. And then at the end, I do server set public transform. Maybe that is what I want to do.
I've got myself a rondel. It's a style of late medieval dagger.
I have this in the game.
What makes a rondel, I imagine you might be crying at this point. Well, one thing about them is that they all have a long, thin, very wickedly pointed, stabby blade. I say wickedly pointed. This one is actually blunt because it's designed for fencing against actual people I don't want to kill. But the real things came to a wicked point. They have quite a variety of cross sections, however. Some of them were blunt on one side and sharp on the other. Sometimes they have a form of diamond in section. Diamond, I think, is the most common. But we don't actually have vast numbers of surviving examples of this knife. And much of the evidence we have for them comes from pictures and particularly effigies of knights on tombs carved in stone. Most of the evidence, as far as I know, for their scabbards and fittings come from tombs. The rondel tends to have two round parts to the guard, the pommel and the front guard. Now in this case you can see that the guard is considerably bigger than the pommel, but sometimes it's the other way around, or sometimes they're the same size, and they're not always so big or so round. This one, as you can see, is wavy. I got it because I just thought that, it was a slightly more interesting shape than round. Although I have noticed that if you're in a fight, the blade of an attacker does inevitably end up in the trough between two of the ways. So this gives me a very, very tiny amount of greater control when I'm pushing the blade away. But the difference is very slight. If it was significant, if it gave you a significant advantage, then presumably they would all have had them. And by and large, they don't. I think it's largely decorative. Another thing that is common to pretty much all of them is this flat pommel, which you'll notice is not weighted. It's quite small and flat. It's not a counterweight. It is just a plate for hammering the thing home. Now, my conjecture is that these are designed specifically for dealing with foes in armor. They are late medieval, so they are
Torch is still yellow.
In a battle situation with guys wearing a lot of armor. Now, the standard way that you fight with a dagger,
I'm gonna make these
is that you
size to
cut
content.
So come near me and I'll cut you, and then you stab very quickly in attack, because a stab will finish someone off very, very quickly and efficiently. And you can go on to the next opponent. If my opponent's wearing a full suit of armor, then if I threaten to cut him as he comes in at me, he's not going to be too impressed, because, well, I can't cut through armor with a cut from a knife like this. So maybe these are principally for getting really up close and stabbing really, really hard. They're often shown being held this way around rather than this way around. And a reason for that is that if my opponent is in armor, I'm going to want to get very close to him, get a grip, put this somewhere vital, and then punch it home. And that's where this flat plate on the back comes into its own, because then I can really ram it home and through some weak point in his groin or armpit or eye slit or something like that, finish the job. So that'd be quite brutal, quite close, and quite nasty.
Nearby each other.
I think that's what these were for. They are sometimes
aren't these both
civilians,
yeah,
but that
okay,
doesn't
so where
really
am I?
mean all that much. People often
only went running up
stand
here.
around with something to look cool. By and large, this is a soldier's tool, and it's like I say, stabby and nasty. Lindy Beige!
Must be that up there. There we go, that's him. Yeah, there we go.
You've seen the film, haven't you? Where there's a fight towards the end, and one of the main characters who's a goodie is fighting one of the main characters who's a baddie, and they fight away at long distance for a while, and then they get really close, and then each puts his sword against the other, and they sort of push against each other like this, and the goodie will struggle for a bit, and then the baddie pushing the other way, he'll say something gratuitously evil and provocative. Ha ha! When I finish with you, I shall marry the woman you love and have my wicked way with her, etc. And then he'll say something hysterical or possibly unexpected. Oh, I never really liked her anyway. She's got thick ankles. But the point is that there's a bit of dialogue.
Maybe I need to work on the. I changed my dormancy settings for pawns. Oh, there we go. I'm over here now.
It's an opportunity to get a bit of dialogue in, a bit of raise.
Or I wonder if that's just like server
make the audience
lag on my end.
really, really bad and be supportive of the
There he
good
is.
guy. Come
So
on,
now
get
that's
in, get in.
behaving
And,
accurately.
the cameraman likes it because he can get both faces.
There must be something about the
sound man likes it
relevancy.
because
Let me
he
see
can
if I run
both
away.
dialogues at the same time.
When does it get choppy? It's smooth now, and it's accurate.
Why would anybody do that in real life? It's an untenable situation. If I get so close to my opponent that I'm pressing against him like this, and I'm
Still pretty smooth out there.
I'm
I'm navigating at a diagonal
Why would I just carry
from
on
that screen.
pushing? What do I hope to achieve? Am I going to push my way all the way through his sword?
Stay in that open area for a bit and run away.
That's not going to happen, is it? Am I just trying to push him back? Well, possibly, but there are better ways to achieve this. And why do I want to push him back? That's not what we're being shown
Now it's choppy.
in the film. It's as though this is a moment of struggle,
It
and
is.
each man is putting
not.
great emphasis on the importance of pushing, as though this could achieve something. It's not going to achieve anything. But I could, if only I had some sort of big lever on me. But I do. I have a sword, and about this pivot point, I could just move.
Oh yeah,
I could just slice.
I've seen that. Dual wielding with two
So a while ago, I
hands.
was asked, would I make a video about dual wielding? And I answered that call, and I did make a video about dual wielding, but you can't really cover the entirety of a topic in one short video. So here's a bit more on that. Now this is a longsword. Now, yes, they could be used one-handed, thought of. Yes, they could possibly sometimes be used with a shield, but by and large, a sword like this is used two-handed. But perhaps, I put it to you, even though I have both hands on one weapon, I'm still perhaps
So
dual
what was I
wielding.
trying to test? Oh yeah, building.
No, surely. Dual wielding is when you have one hand on one weapon and one hand on another different weapon. So you've got a hatchet in each hand, something like that. That would be dual wielding. But this isn't dual wielding. Well, if I've got the hatchet in each hand, I'm unlikely to hit with both at the same time. That's not normally a very clever move in a fight. Normally I'll hit with one and then the other and so forth. And with this, I could hit you once, I could hit you twice, I could hit you another time, I could hit you like that, and then I could stab you. And the delay between the hits and the stabs is about the same.
Okay,
I hit you
there we go.
with one hand and then with the other.
Okay.
And one hand and then with that one. It's roughly the same.
Try to
So
describe.
perhaps I was dual wielding, even though I had both hands
Just
on
mixed
this.
dies.
I had this
I
always
just
in
died by
readiness. Knights of the period are often pictured with these daggers worn on their right-hand side, suggesting that they're expecting to grab them really quickly with the right hand.
Finish the roofs.
Civilians
Might as well do
are sometimes
floor.
shown with them on the left. There are other combinations of dual wielding. I have, for instance, in the past,
Oh,
fought
see
with a
here.
spear
This is
and a dagger at
visible,
the same time.
and
So
I'm
imagine
walking
this
on
is a
it.
spear now, and we have something a bit more spear-like.
Oh, I just clicked.
So
Now I
here
did
we've
spawn
got,
it.
Staff sling,
Oops.
turning into a spear, and I've got a dagger in this hand.
Let's see if I can
actually
erase
fight
it.
reasonably effectively with the spear, and if someone gets a little bit too
That's
close
this
to me,
player.
I've still got the dagger, and there's no delay in getting it out. It's in my hand already. But here, I'm not fighting spear and dagger.
Doesn't look like I can erase anything as this
When there's some
character.
distance
What
from
about this
me,
guy?
the spear is what I'm
Okay.
fighting with, and
Ooh.
the dagger just happens to be just there
Oh, I have to
in
fix
readiness.
owning
I'm not
character
dealing
thing, because now
damage
the
with
delete thing's not
dagger
working.
At this point, not until he gets close enough for me to swap to the other weapon. But the delay is almost nil. You can, perhaps, I put it to you, be effectively dual wielding, even though you're using a two-handed weapon. Lindy Maze!
Hey, it's Thomas, organic fat loss specialist of the #1 most subscribed fitness channel on YouTube. And you're probably wondering, what the heck is on my feet? It's onions, man. And this is the old school way of how people used to detox. Actually, some people still do it.
the hell?
You see, Harvard Medical School explains that detoxing may aid in restoring energy, weight loss.
I have in my hand here a crow's beak, or if you like naming things in foreign languages for no particular reason, it's a bec de corbin, which is French for crow's beak. And you can see the beak here, which gives it its name. It's not as long as a halberd. It's about the height of the wielder, and halberds are quite a bit longer. This was used generally not by the ordinary foot soldiers, but by knights in lots of armour, and they appear in the very late medieval, 15th century typically. So these are being used by guys in lots of armour against other guys who are also wearing loads and loads of very good plate armour. Now, according to Wikipedia, which as you know is the most totally reliable source in the world on everything, the difference between a bec de corbin and a lucerne hammer is the shape of the hammerhead. The bec de corbin is split into 4 little bits.
That might be the only thing I needed to do there.
Has one central
but this still...
I would take that with a massive pinch of salt if I were you. In fact, I don't intend to waste much of my life trying to work out exactly which term I should be applying to exactly which weapon. Different people in different times in different countries used the same word to refer to different weapons, or different words to refer to the same weapon. It's all very vague. Sometimes the hammerhead was one shape, sometimes another. Sometimes it had studs sticking out the front for grip, and other times it was plain. Sometimes it was divided into 3 or 4 prongs. Sometimes instead of a beak there was a curved axe head. Sometimes the spike at the top was really long, and other times it was more modest in proportion. Sometimes the axe head, instead of being curved, was straight, and sometimes instead of a spike at the top there was a spearhead, but more often actually I think there was a spike. And sometimes the hammerhead had a little sort of beak-like protrusion. Essentially, all these weapons are pretty much the same. You've got a 4 to 6 foot long stout stick, and at one end you've got a Swiss Army knife arrangement of killing and cutlery. On one side,
I'm on the server. How do I make sure it doesn't replicate?
On the top, they've got a stabby bit. On the other side, they've got either a cutty or a pecky bit. And at the bottom, either on one side or both, they've got a hooky bit. One obvious ancestor of these weapons is the warhammers. You could say that all of these things are just like big, overgrown warhammers. But another ancestor is perhaps the Danish axe, which is sort of the same, in that it's a long, stout stick, at the top of which there is a cutty bit, a bashy bit, a stabby bit, and a hooky bit. All right, so this is your new long axe, is it? Ouch! Careful with that, that's really sharp. You can have someone's eye out with that.
Man, I have to go to one of these error things and do what they do wrong. Switch has authority. Okay.
Are we French? No, man. Yeah, right.
I want to do whatever they did wrong.
This is not a fantasy movie. It's quite clearly set in the year 1348. It says so, although it doesn't say where. Although if you watch the DVD extras, it's quite clear.
As soon as I read the script and I opened the page and it said England 1348.
Which would explain why everyone speaks English. This shot, like several others, shows a rat, reminding us of this idea that the plague was spread by rats, although it almost certainly wasn't. It was more likely to spread like the flu, you know, through coughs and sneezes. Right, well, we find ourselves in the biggest monk's cell in Christendom. And what a incredible filthy one it is as well. Why don't they make him clean it up? Now, let's examine how this room is lit. There is this orangey light on the far wall. Quite clearly, it's not coming from this light here. So, from what? But there's also this white light in 2 big pools to the left. Moonlight, presumably, shining through 2 massive holes in the wall. Well, if this is moonlight, then the moon is shining at that sort of angle, so what on earth is causing this circle of light illuminating the crucifix on the back wall? Are there 2 moons in this world? Are you sure it's not fantasy? Here is our hero, a monk, and he lives in a world of medieval cliches. One in which mist drifts backlit across half the shots of the film, and people do lots of their work at night for no particular reason.
A simulated proxy?
And you'll see this massively powerful arc light. If they got lighting that powerful, what do they need the torches for? Of course, everything happens at night because it's just so much more dramatic. And, of course, what we want to see is a plague doctor. Yes! There are 3 problems I can think of with this doctor's mask. The first is that the beak is a bit thin. They tend to be much fatter than that, and they were stuffed with sweet-smelling things like rose petals in order to protect the wearer from the dangers of the miasmas. The next problem is that doctors wore these, and in this period doctors were considered low-status quacks, and I don't think you'd find one in a monastery. But perhaps the clincher is that these masks didn't appear
until the
I could say
1600s.
if you're not the local, if you're not controlling this pawn, make it invisible.
Making his way through the
But
dark corridors of the monastery,
that would be like
while
multicasting
dark
it.
with massive amount of firelight and scorching the ceilings with his huge
So I'm
torch.
thinking,
Where is this moon
what is
meant
this?
to be? It's lighting up that crucifix on that wall, and yet it's also shining through this door horizontally straight into this monk's face. How many moons are there? Lighting man, make up your mind. As is standard in these films, the monasteries are shown as bleak and white and colourless, whereas in fact these people were Catholics and their place would have been a riot of decoration.
I don't know if this is something I can
Prayer
access.
did actually exist, and I'll put a lick of paint on the crucifix at least. Now we see this monk here has a proper tonsure. You see there's a
Roll
tonsure,
simulated
but
proxy.
our man has a micro tonsure, and you really have to be eagle-eyed to see it at any point. Yes, can you see it in this shot, for instance? You can see everyone else's tonsure, but not his, because presumably that would have been
I think this is
more rats,
C++ stuff.
and,
That's not what I
bodies
need.
would have been washed scrupulously clean.
Yes, correct.
And she does. She leaves immediately. It seems everything was ready to go.
Okay, wait.
She even had a
No, this
horse
is good.
saddled
So
up
if-
and ready to go, waiting outside for her. This poor girl, she wears rags.
I do want
She's got
clients to be
her
able to
own
do
horse,
this.
or
Clients it
one
works
no
fine
mind
on.
her taking in perpetuity. And,
What I need
he
is-
puts on her his cloak. Now, of course, he is slightly
just had it.
taller than her, so you might think it might look a
Up in
little
my
bit
mind.
long on
Shit.
her. And yet, when she rides away, it nearly reaches the
Oh,
ground off
no.
the horse. Hello. Oh, haven't you got a comb? I've just watched a video made by Thrand and Eldgrim about throwing knives. Now theirs was in response to one that I made years ago, and so this is my response to their response. First up, I'm very glad, by the way, if you want to see it, you can click here and that's the link to their video. I'm very glad to see that you're experimenting, because experimenting is good. If you actually try something out, it's practical, and I always like to see that. It's good to see that Eldgrim is brave enough to rely on the shield in front of him. But he's quite confident, isn't he? He's quite confident that it's not going to be pierced through it. If you threw something like a javelin
I guess I could just do that.
at a board like that, I don't think he would have felt
This
quite
later.
so confident behind it, because javelins are really effective at penetrating. They're a lot heavier. They've got big heads and sharp bits on them, and it seems that they were a genuine threat to someone even from behind a shield. Whereas it seems that you were confident behind that shield, you were safe.
I still want to do this too.
The point you were trying to make was, does the point stick in even when someone is advancing or retreating from you? And I'm glad to see that you didn't talk about absolute no spin knife throwing. You were accepting that there is a slight spin. I think you called it quarter spin or whatever. It's almost impossible to throw something without spinning it at all. You can experiment yourselves with this. You get a ball of any sort, get a tennis ball and just try to throw it without spinning it at all, and you'll probably find that it's next to impossible. Anyway, with a knife, yes, you can throw one with a very, very slow spin, and yes, as you demonstrated, it will.
So the remote is going to do the good stuff. Authority is going to come back to do the good stuff after.
Point blank, wouldn't it? You'd have time to throw one or two knives like that before someone was just on
Collision's
top of you.
off, so
But at that sort of range, you can get it to stick in with the right technique.
do this.
Most of the time, reasonably reliably. And I also accept that it's
No, I can just set hidden in game.
to be killed with a throwing knife. It's not terribly likely, but yes, it's possible to penetrate it deeply enough by a throwing knife that yes, it could kill you. What I, in my earlier video, was making fun of was what we're shown in movies. What we're shown in movies is that knives are thrown end over end. They always stick in point first.
Will that
even
work?
if
Can
they
I
miss their
unhide it
intended
on
target.
server
And
only?
if they hit a person, they are invariably instantly fatal. And I think we're actually agreed that that is ridiculous. Now, my test for just how effective throwing knives are is, does anyone hunt with them? Now, in America, I think a fair few people, more than elsewhere is the impression I get, enjoy throwing knives as a fun thing to do, as a hobby. And it's quite satisfying, I'm sure, when you get your point first thump. Yes!
I think I'm going to have to do this.
That's great. But if you actually relied on hunting to feed yourself or make a living, would you choose the throwing knife? Does anyone? Now, obviously, Americans aren't throwing knives at each other, in war anymore. But does anyone hunt? I mean, I know in America they hunt with bows and fishing rods and rifles and all manner of things. Does anyone hunt with throwing knives? Really? I mean, would you choose that as a weapon? If you could say use a javelin, a spear. Lots of hunters from
countries around the world, Australian Aboriginals, for instance, and tribesmen in Africa, they hunt with throwing weapons, and they tend to use speary, javelin-y, atlatl-y type things, which are really effective. Enormously more effective, may I suggest, than...
Actually, no, I just need to set the material. It doesn't need to be dynamic.
Are definitely very common things, very effective weapons. We're used right the way throughout pretty much the entirety of the human past as stabby things. You get a knife, and you stab it in someone, and that's going to do them in. In close melee, a knife is extremely effective, but it's a really I bought this recently in Finland for a not insubstantial amount of money, and I have no intention of throwing this, frankly. It's just too nice, it's too expensive, and if I want to hit something hard by throwing something at it, well, stones are quite cheap, and I'll throw stones, and if you throw a decent, hefty stone at someone, you hit them in the face, you'll smash bone, just as you were talking about how you could, with a really heavy knife, just break bone just by the sheer mass of the thing you're throwing at them. Well, yeah, stone will do that, and stones are very plentiful and they're very cheap. And if I want to use a specialist hurting people,
then if you're locally controlled, maybe this will filter out the clients and allow me to continue doing the rest of it.
I don't think that's coincidence. So yes, you can get knives to stick in the way you say. You can throw with that very slow spin technique. But that's not what people in the ancient world were doing. If you go into battle, you want to use the most effective weapon, and the most effective throwing weapon wasn't enough. So I've got them.
It's done. Oh, the building owner thing I still need to work on. Oh, I need to try building a new building. Whatever, doesn't matter. Those snap points are off on one of these. I wonder which one. Nope, didn't allow me to do it. Shit. But yeah, I have to see what this looks like. I might need to rework the destroy function because I may not have fixed that up since I changed the interactables thing. Alright. Oh, can I move out of the way of that, or am I gonna get teleported back? Oh shit, and it destroyed that pawn. So many weird shits. I could just respawn him. Make those clip out a little bit further. Anyway. Ah, success. I no longer see the server's stupid wait, damn it, fucking lag. Oh, I do see it. Shit. These is up. A smaller floor, maybe. But okay, more stuff to fix. Oh, the controller disappeared. Had nothing to do with this, though. Okay, didn't I save the reference to the item on there now, though? I could just do that. I feel like all that is unnecessary. Name does not equal, then just reset it. Okay. This is not a building, then is it an interactable? Get. Oh, and then this one, I'm not destroying the building. Could do both. I don't know why that wasn't happening. It's weird. Maybe it was going there when complete or something. Hey, Twist, what's up, man? Oh, these all need to go here when done, too. Alright, I did the building thing. Wait, destroy actor, and then where'd my destroy actor of this go? I guess I put it down there and deleted it, thinking it was the older one left around. Oh, no, it's plugged into that. Ah. Oh, I need that to go to another one then. No. I have the microphone away from my face. That might be what you're... No, I'm all the way over there. I mean, I do have some like back pain today. It's pretty annoying considering it's like when it's getting better, it hurts more, and like you can tell. But or your trash earbuds, definitely the trash earbuds, dude. Swap hands. I do have a swap hands. Yeah, man. No, wait. Yeah. Ooh, buildings. There we go. Let's see what's up with that floor. Maybe something specific. I haven't really added anything as much as trying to fix stuff. Nothing special. It's just the building. Just build it. Setting owning character. It should be working. Maybe it just wasn't working because of that code I was running. I made it so you can dye the torches. I made it so you can dye the street lamps. I made all of those interactable items like the doors and street lamps and mounted candles. Things that weren't technically items, I've now made them items. So you could try to pick it up. But then I made a way to bypass that too. Damn, it's not deleting it. What did I do to ruin that? The owning character thing. I wonder if doors work even. Shit. Shit, nope. Oh. Gotta watch out for those. Ah. Cool. Okay. I fixed it. Okay. I wonder if dyes and property things are gonna work. Okay, it thinks I own that. That's cool. Whew, close one, right? So if I can have like recognizing that you're stealing items from each other, that would be awesome. I would just be really excited about that. password seems to be working. Nice. Wait, is it like completely? Just sound like mumbling anyway. I just don't like wearing the headphones like all day long. It's like cumbersome. I'm a fragile little flower. Like this red flower over here. I'm like that. Okay, the password thing works. Or the ownership thing works. Let's try stealing items. I will drop a shirt. You stole from... They didn't get it. Huh. So that was working before. I wonder what I'm missing on that front. Stole tunic from... Okay. It should be getting set correctly though. That's a really easy one. Maybe it's getting overridden somehow. Try this one. And I'm seeing the default colors on here too. That's only at spawn though. I may have to just set the colors customized when I load things in. But let's try, I guess. Okay. Stole tunic from. Let me make new characters, new equipment. See if the ownership thing works properly. These are just items. That's just really straightforward. That should be... I know the controller part works because it was working before, and the stuff that I've changed is the items. Owning character stuff. I bet you... let's see. I should set a new owner whenever you pick something up. And drop something. I'm gonna have to put the die names back through everything. Get pick up item itself. So this is item. So I could say get Let me go back to the controller and just see what I'm looking at here. Why are these refresh things not firing off? And build menu open still? Oh, if the menu's closed. Oh, okay, that's... Let me just do that real quick. Ah, it's after the is valid. That should help. Even though this is firing on the invalid. Oh, that's to owning client. Oh, I should do that there. After the cast on client. funny how some exec lines you can just grab immediately, and some go like, oh my god, you're changing so much. It freezes up while you do it. I don't think it should be processing things when you're grabbing a wire, and not until you drop the wire off. Maybe it's, I don't know. Alright, that should take care of those warnings, errors, whatever. I still want to look at the steal function. So, interactive display, steal item from player, owning character. So, owning character on item when server pickup from event pickup from interactable. So, this is event pickup. So if that happens first, so that I can put after this, I can say a new owner. Does it have to be on server? We are on server. Okay. So whenever you pick something up, it should set your to be the owner of it after checking if you're stealing it. Whenever you drop something, I want that to happen too. If you're picking up and dropping the item though, will that... Well, if it's an item, that will get its own save thing. The building thing. Oh, I wonder if buildings will end up resetting it somehow. Unload. I'll have to play around with it a bit. And placing items too. Good morning, everybody. I keep adding features. I'm sorry, Twist, but especially Gamerflame, he's been like coming on and complaining every time, like, export it already. Bah. Got to plug these in. So that is active. Place item. Look at all those wires. What if it was just the wires and no nodes? What would you do?
Oh, what were the chances of that? When I was, I think, 13 years old, I bought a copy of RuneQuest, and was very impressed by it in many ways. And one of the things I liked about it was the fumble system. I don't know if any roleplay game before then had a fumble table, and the RuneQuest's fumble table definitely made combats a bit more lively and entertaining. These are the things that go wrong when you're fighting. I did actually write my own fumble table to replace the one in RuneQuest, partly based on my personal experience of fighting. A lot of the things that they had on the table struck me as pretty improbable.
So let's see one of these things I build, for
breaks,
example.
Shield. I've never known that happen in any reenactment skirmish. It's not impossible, but pretty unlikely. So what, I hear you cry, are the most common fumbles? Well, slipping over is pretty common, losing your footing. One I remember, because we used to do a lot of fighting in woods, was that you would walk backwards into something. That was very common, because if someone's coming at you there, someone's coming at you there, you'd quite often just position and you'd be moving backwards, and that's a very easy way to walk backwards into a tree, trip over something. Getting your spear caught.
Right, so the building doesn't matter. Let's just look at an item I can build.
One type of fumble that easily accounted for more than half of all fumbles. I would say almost 9/10. I couldn't put the exact figure, but the very considerable majority of fumbles was this particular kind. And it's a kind which didn't get represented in RuneQuest. And I've not
so that should be setting the onion character.
Game or skirmish game. And it's the changing weapon fumble. That was the most vital part of our skirmishes. When I was doing reenactment, we started off with spears, and then there would come a point when you had to change weapon for something shorter. You would ditch
do something
your spear,
specific, like the
draw a
jar.
sword, or if you were closer than that, you perhaps ditch and draw a dagger, something really, really close. And if you didn't ditch your spear, he would then step up to you. Your spear would be pretty.
Maybe this has to be done on server.
So you had to go to something short, really, really quick. And it was that.
I bet you event just built
his
his server
Dropping a spear
event.
is easy, but will you get your sword out quickly and cleanly? The
tiniest
bit of fumbling in getting your sword
Ooh.
out very often was.
I need an ooh gif.
You get hit with a blunt sword.
Like Monty Python, like, no, like the back of the throat. Ooh, no, no, ooh, as in alarm, as in, ooh, ooh, yes, ooh, Alright, that was the entire Monty Python skit. Sorry. From the Holy Grail.
It's a significant chance to get a new.
So the ooh I was doing is because I didn't have reliable checked on that, and it might not have been saving the name of items.
When you're trying to get that weapon out, you're under pressure. There's someone coming at you with a weapon of more appropriate length to the distance that he's chosen, and you think, oh no, I've got a weapon that's too long. I'm going to have to ditch it. And whilst you're doing that, you're also trying to avoid him because he's got the advantage of you. Maybe he's got his sword already and he's charging at you, and you've got to be moving.
I just need to do it with some new items.
Weapon
do it with the jar.
Not into the guys around you, not trip over the tree stumps or whatever. And that's when it all went wrong. Obviously, if you're not doing it under pressure, and you can just put your spear down and then draw your sword at leisure and get ready, that's not a problem. But under pressure, it's very easy to fumble drawing your sword. When I say fumble, I don't mean that you then end up dropping the sword on the floor. That didn't happen on the forest floor. That didn't happen very often. But a delay in getting your sword out, which meant that you would miss your chance to defend yourself using your sword, I suppose in roleplay game terms, miss next attack or something like that. That was very, very common.
I need to figure out how to detect the loading of network stuff. It's really important. Let me just concentrate for a second. That jar, because I know for sure I looked at it. Everybody's stuff is black now. What the hell? Oh, that's the default color still. I haven't dyed anybody's stuff, clothing in this game. The torch should be yellow, that's the only thing. You stole from one, stole from you. Okay. I need to, like, short break. Just a minute. I'll leave you with this. Will this work? No, these owners aren't getting reset. That's fine. They're before I fix the code. The door works. Let me try some other crap. Drop a backpack. Get a backpack. Hands are full. This is why I put this here. Stow back. Stow back. Okay. You stole a backpack from one. Stole a backpack from you. What if I drop it now? You stole a backpack from two. One stole a backpack from you. Where is everything? I'm trying to find her in the dark. Using the get button just to try and find the interactive. Alright, let's get that torch. Oh, I stole a broadsword. That's fair enough. I need to... What the fuck? What am I doing down here? I have to change that replication thing, make them so they're always, they don't go idle, don't go dormant or whatever, or just make it better. Okay. Laggy on my own computer. That moonlight though. Where? No, I think I got like, I ran over the mountain somehow. Yeah, I'm all the way over here. What the shit? Weird. I need like an add save location. Torch is still yellow. And the colors, though, it's hard to read. There we go. Okay, be right back a sec. I'll leave this up so it's like a freeze frame of that action, but I'll be right back. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I just want to, oh, this one. Oh, I need to hide the old menu. Okay. There we go. Now that's characters all the way. Oh, blocked by this thing. Yeah, now that they're always relevant, much more accurate. None of that teleporting around jazz. I just have to figure out how to make that work better. Easier to tell when the sun goes down. You can see the torch illuminating the trees. Where is he? Is he out here somewhere? There he is. Oh, it is popping around a little bit. I'm not behind the trees right now. I should be out in the hill in front of the trees. It shows me jumping. Oh, there's some trees here. Maybe I was. Oh, I was right. Okay. Nope, I turned left. It's not catching it. And I'm here. The prediction's like taking over. I'll have to work with that. See what's up with it. Sometimes, and once you get into radius, then it's accurate. Very, thank you, thank you. It's just a voice. I don't know what's so special about it. So I'll come back to that. Buildings call for that's easy. Use a backpack, open it. All the containers. Gonna need that. Wait, this does work. It was working. Oh, from the hand model. Ah, yes. Alright, that's easy enough. Does it equal model here? So if widget's not open, open it. If the widget's some other container, open this one. But if the widget is this container, close container. Just need to copy that. For any containers that could be held, I guess these. Hand models, that's right. Bucket can be held. Crate could be held technically. I don't think I changed the model.
So, how does one use a crow's beak? Well, according to the treatises that I've seen, there's an awful lot of hooking involved, because this makes a very effective hook. You can get that round the back of somebody's knee and pull his leg towards you, perhaps bringing him off balance and falling onto his backside, or you can hook over his shoulder and pull towards you, perhaps breaking his balance, and he falls onto his face. You've got a spike at the top. It's quite definitely not a blade. This is a square cross-section, very, very stout spike. You could possibly puncture an enemy or just push him over with it and get a good hard grip on him, and then perhaps go for some weak point and finish him off with the spike. You've also got the hammerhead for battering him senseless, and in the case of
you know what else? I want to change.
You've got this, which perhaps could puncture deep enough through armor to kill someone. And it's
needs to be a little bit smaller.
Good, is it? Now, the treatises I've seen show these as being used much like a quarterstaff. However, don't forget that they're used in these treatises for duels, one-on-one fights. Quite often the business end, the head end if you like, is actually held low, and the feral end is held high to start off with. And some of the plays start with an attack with the feral end, or parry using the feral end, and then you go in with this end. It's rather difficult for me to demonstrate any of the moves here because I'm rather restricted for space. So it's used something like a quarterstaff in two hands. You do not use this with a shield. It's way too heavy for a one-handed weapon. This is quite definitely two-handed and only two-handed. Now, looking at those plays, I remember thinking to myself, well, if you're going to use it that way, surely you may as well have a hook on both ends. And then I saw this picture. This picture shows a judicial trial, and these chaps are trying to settle some dispute. I imagine, I hope, it's a very, very serious dispute, because these battles were generally to the death. And you'll notice that it's got a hook on both ends. There's a sort of fleur-de-lis thing on the opposite end. But I've never seen anything like that shown as being used in a battle. And that makes sense to me, because if you've got a hook on both ends of it, you could accidentally hook one of your own side and be a menace to your supporting fellows, and you wouldn't make yourself popular with them. So it's used a bit like a quarterstaff, but with a menagerie of killing bits at least one end. The crow's beak.
Lindy From my days running around various woods in national parks in Britain, fighting skirmishes in Dark Age costume with other reenactment groups, I learned a thing or two about what makes a good fighter? What makes the sort of guy that you want to have on your side? Now, practicing on Thursday nights in the Students' Union in Room 27, we would find that certain people were very good at wielding their weapons. So in a one-on-one duel, they were pretty handy and often won because they're very quick with their hands. They're very good at feinting and parrying and getting around your shield and stabbing and all the rest of it. And so you'd think, well, he's pretty handy. But actually, when it came to a skirmish, say 15 aside, 30 aside, something that sort of side of fight, it was quite noticeable.
The music, I don't know. How to stop it. Okay.
They were not the most useful guys to have on your team. The people who made the greatest difference to which side won weren't the guys necessarily who were very good at wielding their weapons, but they were the guys who developed a sort of skirmish skill, if you like, an ability to read the battle, an ability to see when was the right time to charge, what the enemy was likely to do next, where our own lines were weak and which bit needed shoring up, where they were weak and how they could be exploited. These guys would take a look at the opposition, size up what the situation was, and showed initiative. And they were very often the ones who managed to get round the flank and go dunk, 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 along the back of their rows, stabbing loads of guys who were transfixed by the people in front of them. They're all fighting there, and they haven't seen them get round, and they get stabbed down the line, and suddenly it's all over very quickly. Once one side in a skirmish has got a fair bit ahead, then there's almost no recovering it. It doesn't matter how good you are at wielding your weapons, even if the last 3 guys in the opposition side are really good at wielding their weapons. If they're surrounded by 12 other guys, they're not going to win. So it's the guys who have got this skirmishing skill. And this is a skill which seems to be absent from a lot of roleplay games. For example, lots of roleplay games will say how good you are with a sword or a spear or whatever. But how good are you at reading the battle? How good are you at knowing exactly when the right moment to charge is? How good are you at spotting the weaknesses of a formation? Which guy in it is just about to attack or run away or whatever? Because that skill, the ability to read what's going on, awareness of what's around you and what other people are doing and why it might be right or wrong, that decides who wins a skirmish far more than how good you are at swishing a sword about. I have been asked for years to make a video about one of these. Now, as I'm talking to you now, I don't actually know what I'm going to call this video. I might call it something like Some Points About the Morning Star. But then again, I might not use the word Morning Star at all because... Late medieval hitty things. I have in my left hand something you might call a mace, but if you want to call it a morning star, I'm not going to stop you. And in my right hand, I have a warhammer of some sort. Why isn't this a bec de corbin? Isn't that a crow's beak there? Well, a bec de corbin was generally a much longer thing, sort of the length of a poleaxe, that sort of thing, about the height of the wielder, whereas this is quite clearly a one-handed weapon. I've got a hammer on one end and a beak on the other, and a little spiky thing on the top. And this has a spike on the top too. So you could thrust with these. Here we go. Although I would imagine that most of the thrusting was done really, really close up rather than any sort of long reaching. These are smashing, piercing weapons. And I have a choice of a piercer or a smasher on this one. And I can change from one to the other in a blink. These appear late in the medieval period, and the most probable reason for that is quite simple: what the opponent is wearing. If the other guy is wearing loads and loads of armour, then it's really difficult to hurt him with a sword. You can't cut through well-made metal armour, so you just try to bash the hell out of the guy in the armour and knock him senseless, or possibly with this puncture deep enough to actually cause some significant damage. These are not dual weapons. If you have one of these in your hand and you take a big swing, the weight is all at this end. It gives you a lot of punch, bang, but then it's quite difficult to get back again to parry. And if someone wants to knock aside your weapon, he has a very easy time of it because all the weight's up here, so he just has to
put some horizontal weight force in there, and that knocks that aside. It's very slow for me to come back. So if someone's got something a bit nippier, like a longsword, I'm going to lose out. However, I don't believe anyone went into battle with just one of these. If I'm on a horse, I'm controlling my horse in the other hand, I take a big bash against you with this, and then I spur away. I'm away before you can respond. Or if I'm on foot, I've got a shield in my other hand. I've made other videos about dual wielding. I don't believe people went into battle armed like this very often. So, is this a Lucerne hammer? No, it's a little bit too short. One other thing I wanted to talk about is the square section of the haft. Now, you can see that towards the head end, the square section makes perfect sense because these supporting bits of metal down the side want to rivet onto a flat surface, and so that accommodates them quite nicely. Now, this particular example, you notice, has got a rounded handle down where I hold it, and that makes it much quicker and easier to get one onto the other. Now, someone else in another video on YouTube suggested that a reason for square-handled halves is that you can feel where the head is, and so you align your hand with the head correctly. So if I want to hit you with this beak, I want to hit you like that, and not accidentally like that. But the thing is that even with my eyes shut, I can feel immediately where the head is. I don't need the square handle at all to align this correctly. It's dead easy for me to realign, so I don't believe that reason for the square handled, the square hafts. Right, late medieval hitty things. They have all sorts of heads, beaks, hammers, spikes, and so forth. I don't think we should really tie ourselves in knots as trying to categorize and name every single one. They're a weight on the end of a stick with some sharpness involved, and you hit people with them. There are two main ways to hold a knife, one point up and one point down. Now, in a knife fight, the prize is your life, not just avoiding some slit in your gown. So you've got to get it right. This is a fight, but which is the better way? Well, perhaps it would shed some light if we see what the treatises say. Now, they seem quite clear. They prefer by far the downward or ice pick grip. True, the other way they don't exactly bar, but they never show us that flip. Now, it's of the rondel that they seek to teach us. It's thin and stabby and long, but what sort of techniques have failed to reach us? Perhaps the choice of the rondel is wrong. Now, I learned my knife fighting with a knife like this. It's shorter and fatter and sort of cutty. An attacker with this is just taking the piss against me with this. He's surely putty. Now, I learned through reenactment and kung fu, and not through late medieval sources. And I know that complacency will never do, so I took some HEMA courses. And I went along with an open mind, and took a wooden thing like this for safety's sake. And I tried out their moves to see what I could find. And, oh boy, the next day I didn't half ache. But anyway, I found that my first suspicion proved true. The ice pick grip limits your angles. There really is just one thing you can do. And, you know, I'd like more options when my life dangles by a thread. I'm this close to death. I can feel my heartbeat drumming. You know, this could be my last...
He's so fucking passionate.
Breath. Yeah, with just one opening move, he'll see it coming. You know, now it's a good stab, I'll grant you. It's hard and downward and deadly. But one stab is many too few. Now, if you hold it this way, you've got a medley. Yeah. Now, try this. Hold it ice pick on the outward side. You get to here, and you're weak and in pain. A half decent force here applied, and down you go. Unlikely to rise again. It's feeble and slow and so easy to block. An attack from here.
I'm not sure if this auto-fill thing is important, but I want to make them all.
Look, you've near enough got me in an arm lock, and you're not even in the same room. Now, the treatises do show some attacks, that drop low and then come up like so. But try that and I'll be relaxed. You know, a big move like that is so slow. And if you offer and it's thin, so it's not much of a cleaver, but it's often at least a little bit sharp. So why didn't you cut your finger? Yeah, well, the alternative is you start playing the harp. So just grab it. This is no time to linger.
Buildable.
Now, I'll choose something shorter and sharper.
Oh, should I be able to build clothes too?
We'll see who's the harper. And while you go in for some big twists, I'll slash you. It's quicker. Put a gash in your wrist. I'll cut through your tendons and under your arm and turn your limb into so much slack rope.
Dr. Seuss.
I have faith in the
Sadistic
speed
Dr. Seuss.
I do harm.
Let's just...
You dope to pin on...
Yeah, I think I need to make it so you can build at least the clothing. And that's easy.
There are other ways, as shown by the likes of Fairbairn Sykes, to stab and slash in 100 strikes. So, come our dagger duel. I'll hold it my way. You hold it yours, and we'll see who carried the day. Having taken pause to reflect, maybe I wouldn't, because that's just what you'd expect. Lindy Beige! I have here 2 bits of wood that I've had made for me. This one is destined to be the handle of a poleaxe, and this one, much longer and thinner, will become a spear shaft. But before I attached the ironmongery to turn them into those weapons, I thought I'd use them for a while to illustrate quarterstaffs, or perhaps I should say quarterstaves. Now, some people will say that these weapons are actually called quarterstaves and not quarterstaffs, and some people will say that no, it's 1 quarterstaff, but 2, plural, quarterstaves. Thank goodness such sort of drivel doesn't matter in videos like this. You know what I'm talking about? Big sticks that you hit people with. Right, so quarterstaffs, because that's the word I'm used to. They are associated with the English.
The second field is basically just placeholder until the code. I wrote one code to put the color in, but if the color isn't written in there, I have something in placeholder.
Took great pride in their skill with the quarterstaff, and they trained in it, wrote things about it, and had competitions in it, and generally very proud of themselves. And there are heartwarming stories to warm the cockles of any Englishman's heart of men armed with these, beating up loads of Spaniards armed with rapiers and stuff. But before we get too carried away with the Englishness of the quarterstaff, can we just remind ourselves that we're talking about a big stick, and I don't think the English can really claim to have invented the big stick, nor be the first people in the world, or the only people in the world, ever to think to themselves, hey, do you know, you could hit people with these. Now, a style of kung fu that I studied for some years was Wing Chun, and that had a pole form. Granted, it's not a very ancient pole form, but I think we should just remind ourselves it's a big stick. Now, just how big a stick is it? And is there anything else we should know about it? What's it made out of? Well, this one's made out of ash, and ash is definitely one of the woods that was used. You want something pretty solid, pretty hard, and got a substantial bit of weight to it, because you're going to hit people with it. You're going to swing as well as thrust, and so you want something that's fairly substantial and fairly stiff. Now, I've seen in many fictional representations of quarterstaffs and some historical attempts at reconstruction, someone is pictured holding something that's got bark on it and little nodules all down it where twigs have been cut away. It looks like a coppiced pole or perhaps a sapling. And yes, you could make a quarterstaff just by cutting a sapling or coppiced pole to length and trimming off the twigs, but it wouldn't be very good. Better than nothing, but not anything like as good as something taken from a solid tree trunk. Couple of reasons. One is that you want the outside to be smooth. You want to be able to change grip, slide your hand round as you fight, and that's difficult if it's rough and knobbly. Another thing is that a coppiced pole is young wood. It's largely sapwood, which is soft and springy, and that's not what you want a quarterstaff to be. You want it to be hard and stiff. You want that movement to be accompanied by a sort of thwack
and crunch sound as your opponent's skull crushes, rather than a sort of a boing and laughter noise. The fact that these are made out of tree trunks is a possible reason for why they are called quarter staves, which could then become quarter staffs, in the first place. Because if you want to make a bit of doweling from a tree, you don't actually use the center of the tree where the rings are concentric. You don't use that middle bit of the tree, because then when it seasons, when it dries out, it'll warp and crack. Instead, typically what you do is you cut the tree trunk in half, because that's the easiest single big split to make, and then half again, it's the next easiest big split to make, and then each quarter of the tree trunk can be turned into one quarterstaff, and then when it seasons, it shouldn't crack and it'll not warp very much. So that's one reason that they may be called quarterstaffs. It's a quarter of a tree trunk, or made from, and the rest wouldn't be wasted because ash is excellent firewood. So that's quite a feasible way that they were made. Another reason that they might be called quarterstaffs or quarterstaves is the way you hold them. So for instance, one way of holding them is you put one hand smack in the middle and the other one at about a quarter of the way up. So you've got a quarter of the length, a quarter of the length, and then a half. Quarterstaff. The trouble is that's not the only way to hold one. You can also hold one either side of the quarter mark there, or with one hand on the end and the other one about a quarter of the way up the length. So that's three variations of a hold that might explain quarterstaff. But there are plenty of other ways of holding a quarterstaff as well, for instance, at the 1/3 and 2/3 mark. So if there are loads of ways of holding the thing and everyone's calling it a quarterstaff, I suspect that's not the reason. If we do know the reason, and we don't for sure, I think it's probably the it's a quarter of a tree reason. Right, so how thick are they? Well, I would say you want it to be a little bit thicker than a spear shaft. Now, this spear shaft is 1 1/4 inches in diameter, which is quite typical for a spear shaft. And I would say that's a little bit thin for a quarterstaff. I'd want to be able to whack someone with a little bit more weight. This, on the other hand, which is about 1 3/4 inches, is overkill. This is too heavy and slow.
That shit happens when you try and copy and paste those things embedded.
The region of 1 1/2 inches in diameter seems to be about right. However, some illustrations of quarterstaffs show them as surprisingly thin from the period. Paulus Hector Meyer's quarterstaffs are really quite small sticks, like broom handles. They're quite short too, quite clearly a lot shorter than the user. And yet there are plenty of sources that will tell you that quarterstaff should be 6 feet long, or the height of the user. But there are plenty of others that will say, oh no, they should be much longer than that. 8 feet, 9 feet long is a proper quarterstaff length. Well, if something varies that much in length, from really quite a lot bit shorter than the user to a lot taller than the user, then presumably the technique with which it was used would vary as well. And once a weapon is so different in size that it's used radically differently, you could say it's actually a different weapon rather than just a different size of the same weapon. Anyway, perhaps Hector Meyer's stuff is not really quarterstaff, it's some sort of foreign thing, not like a proper English yeoman's quarterstaff. They seem to have been the weapon of preference for the travelling man. You've got a big stick with you, and with this you can see off brigands. Were they ever used in battle? I've heard people talk about the battlefield version, but I know of no evidence that they were actually used as or regarded as a viable battlefield weapon. If you're going to go into battle, you may as well have something that's quite specialist as a weapon, with a load of ironmongery on one end and axe heads and spiky bits and so forth, rather than just a stick. I've also read many times, and even seen illustrated, quarterstaffs that are iron shod at either end with a sort of tube of iron. That's perfectly feasible. Yes, if the quarterstaff is your preferred weapon, then why not clad the end in iron to give it a bit more punch? But I've never seen an example from the period. I don't know if any survive, and I don't know of any evidence to back that up. It seems feasible, but it might not actually have been true. So how long were they? Well, as I say, it depends on how you use them. Now, the Victorians were quite keen on competitions, and they tended to use the sort of kayak paddle technique, and theirs seem to have been a little bit shorter, around sort of 6 foot. When I did reenactment, we trained with quarterstaffs, And we found that about a foot taller than the user, or about 7 foot, somewhere around there, was ideal. It was partly to do with the technique we were using, however. So how long it should be, I would say, varies with what technique you plan to use it with. I'll be making another video about technique. And now I'm beginning to run out of things to... yes, another thing I can say that it was actually part of standard, would you believe, Boy Scout training until the early 20th century. Scouts were scouts in those days. They learned how to
Hope
whack each
someday
other with
see that
sticks.
notepad empty. Make it fat every stream. I know.
But anyway, the quarterstaff. Yes, it's sort of an English weapon, but let's not get too carried away by the Englishness of it. It seems to have reached its peak at a time when in battle gunpowder was being used as the main battle-winning thing. Guys were wandering into battle with muskets, and if you've got a really big, heavy musket, perhaps with a musket stand put it on, you've got a couple of things right there to hit someone with, so you're very unlikely to carry a quarterstaff as well. But if you're just journeying on your own down the road and you get beset by brigands, in skilled hands, a really big stick is pretty difficult to beat. Lindy Beige! Quarterstaff technique. Now here I am perhaps venturing onto controversial ground, and I dare say that there are people out there who will say, no, what he's saying is completely wrong. But there do seem to be quite a few different ways of using a quarterstaff, partly depending on how big it is, and so I don't have any good reason to say that any one of these is just wrong. It really depends on what you're doing. Now, a lot of people are familiar with that famous duel between Little John and Robin Hood, where the way they hold the staff is usually 1/3 in from one end and 1/3 in from the other end, like a kayak paddle. Always makes me think of the kayak paddle hold. And from there, if you've got a reasonably long stick, and actually this one is a little bit too short, but I'm using it here because I can get it in shot. You don't want me standing way over there and then just too small. So if you've got a decent bit of length on it, from here you can actually swing, and you've got quite a bit of length on the outside of your hand, and that's enough to do a fair bit of damage. And from there, of course, you can immediately swap to a thrust. And as a thrust, it's just a battering ram, it's just the weight of the stick behind it. So it's got quite a bit more punch than, say, a punch. So it's an effective weapon to use 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Get in there, man. It's going to be this month, for sure.
In my reenactment society,
checking in every day.
we found that, in fact,
Tell your
staying in that
friends.
position wasn't really terribly good. There are so many more things you can do with a quarterstaff that someone who's just stuck in this position, notice I'm using it with both
good old memory
arms
wipe.
down, is rather limited. And it's interesting that when I was looking at Powerless Hector Meyer's treatise, almost all the time his fighters are shown with this grip, both palms
141 building types,
we found
including
this quite
clothes.
limiting,
Doesn't
and
really, you know.
we would most of the time have one palm up and one palm down, and would be varying which one it is. So you're constantly changing grip all the time, changing side as well. So sometimes I'd be fighting you on this side, and then I would come around and be fighting you on this side, and swap again and again. And that versatility of grip seemed to be perhaps the main thing which
Really
made
weird where
the
you have to have it
quarterstaff
like
so flippin'
in
good.
memory or something.
So staying like this is rather limiting. Another problem with this grip, doesn't happen very often, but if someone hits you there, whack, and with a quarterstaff, you've got quite a bit of range and a lot of power, so it's just perfectly feasible to do. Whack down. If they hit whack down
Now, what I
there,
do plan on
you've
having
got this
stores
grip.
and all that good stuff.
You
This is
can
just for the
knock
test,
quarterstaff
just so you
out
can
with both of your hands
you don't get
simultaneously.
screwed over if you're
So that was one to watch for.
you
Whereas
lose
if
your
you
backpack, you know.
got your hand on it like this, then a whack there will knock it out of that hand, but you've still got your weapon and you'll get it back pretty quick. We didn't particularly like the double downward grip. We preferred this one. A double upward grip is just rubbish. Don't ever do that. It's useless for anything. But there was one thing that this double downward grip was definitely good for, and that was that block, which is really quick and strong. And from there, of course, you can immediately go into something else. And we would shout, "Head!" at each other. This was for training purposes. You see, when you joined my reenactment society, that was called the Arthurian Society. That's a great name, isn't it? for a reenactment society. The Arthurian Society. Yes, you could dress up as late Romano-British and reenact battles over scummy Saxons and drive them back into the sea, or possibly not. And they changed their name to the English Settlement Society. And do you know what? Recruitment just nosedived overnight. Loads of people wanted to join the Arthurian Society. My goodness, what a recruiting call that is. But the English Settlement Society, what is that? It just makes you think of lots of people sitting down, perhaps drinking tea or something. But later they rallied a little bit and changed their name to NEARS, the Newcastle Early Anglo-Saxon Reenactment Society. NEARS. The Arthurian Society, come on! That's why I joined, it was the Arthurian Society. Anyway, I seem to have strayed from my point. Oh yes, reenactment. That's right, when we joined, we were trained in 2 weapons. The dagger and the quarterstaff. And I would say that this was extremely good training. Only when we had proven ourselves as competent, as confident and safe with both these weapons were we allowed to go on to other weapons like swords, shields, spears, and importantly, joining group fights where the safety of other people was an important consideration. And
check this
the
out.
quarterstaff is very good building
Target
confidence.
container.
And so one of our training exercises was you shout head. Sometimes in the middle of a fight you would shout head. This is just one-on-one training, understand? And then you would make that attack straight down.
Can't get
straight
target
at his
container
head.
on
You
this
do
one.
it quite fast and quite hard. Whack down onto
But
his
if I
head.
get that
And he
and
would
open
then
it, it's got the
respond,
bottle of
having
dye I
heard
just
the
put in
word
it.
head with that parry. And that's quite good at building confidence.
I rebuilt
It's
my
not,
backpack.
You don't want someone to go
Wait, let's...
like this. This isn't good. You don't want someone to put
buttons
it above their
need
head
to
like that.
make sure they
You want them to step into it boldly and confidently
size to content.
and block the move like that. They always succeeded, of course. This was not an attempt to win the fight over someone. It was purely for training. It developed trust and it developed confidence.
Oh, I thought that was a die in my hand.
That parry is done with hands down
Die.
like this.
There you go. Really got orange backpack.
But
Hey, what?
if you're swapping your hands a lot, spinning it round, attacking without aim, bringing it over like that, going into your thrust, going under and thrust the other way, it limits how long the quarterstaff can be. And we found that 7 foot, or about a foot taller than the user, was a handy length, so about that tall, was a handy length for a quarterstaff to be if you're using it in that way. If it's much longer, you have trouble because the ground keeps getting in the way of those moves. Or you have to use up a huge amount of space on the floor, which makes it a little bit impractical. So we came up with about 7 foot as the ideal length for a quarterstaff. But it's quite clear from lots of other people that they've come up with different lengths as well. Now, we progressed. Once we'd been accepted as having not necessarily mastered, but become confident and competent with the quarterstaff, we would then go on to spears. And then we would fight with spears. So spear is much longer and a little bit thinner. And with a spear, if you're using it without a shield on its own, you hold it quite definitely near one end. It gives you loads and loads of reach. More reach than I can actually show you here. So then, with quite a small movement, you can sweep a really big volume in front of you. So if an attack is coming in from the right, you just make actually quite a small movement to your right and you can parry it. And similarly comes in from the left, you can just do the little step, you can block it and parry it that way as well. And you get quite adept at parrying early. You see what the guy's up to and you intercept him early with this long stick and make quite small, quick movements and then counter. And once you get really good at that, then when you go back to the quarterstaff, you go, aha, right. So you grab your quarterstaff like this, you find that you go to the spear hold, and then you sort of stay there because you're actually quite happy with this. You can counter what the other guy's up to, and thrust in, and all that big swinging stuff doesn't seem to be really necessary anymore. And it does seem that that's the way that some people went with the quarterstaff. So that would explain the 9-foot quarterstaff, for instance. It's being used pretty much like a spear. And the Wing Chun pole form, which is supposedly derived from someone who was an expert at fighting with a barge pole, that's a long stick again. It's about 9 feet long. So all that sort of fits. There's a spear-like way of using a quarterstaff. And then there's the other one, which is favoured in Victorian competitions and perhaps quite specific instances. It's very useful if you do have a quarterstaff to be able to swap to some other hole. If you are fighting with him out there and then he gets suddenly closer than you were imagining, or he's attacking you in a new way, you can come to here with holding the stick quite close in, and from here very small movements will block anything coming at you from either side. You can also ground the staff and move it like this. It's very, very, because it's grounded, an extremely strong blow can hit it and it's not going to push it anywhere. And you can almost leave the stick where it is and just defend yourself by changing which side of it you're standing. So, and the grounding technique does turn up in various treatises.
No, we can't both do it.
Ah, I see. I've caught you in a stalemate.
Oh, for goodness sake.
If you get very close to someone, well, you've still got something to ram up against him, so it's not useless. And of course, a lot of fights would degenerate to wrestling pretty quickly anyway. There is a move that I recall using when I fought with quarterstaff, and I can say honestly, hand on heart, I got this move to work first time, every time, against everyone I tried it on. And I fought some very good opponents, and the first time I used this on them, I got it to work. Admittedly, once someone had seen this move, it was almost impossible to get it to work twice. But the first time, I would be holding it much like a spear, fighting. I would then pretend that they were getting the better of me, and I would retreat to this technique, and I would defend myself, looking a bit scared for a bit, and then I would create a bit of room for myself, and then step in, and then I would fight like a spear again, and then whoop, it's getting the better of me, whoa, oh yeah, what's going on here? And I would do that, and I would do that 2 or 3 times to establish in my opponent's mind that when he's getting the better of me, I retreat to here and then stay here, and then I would retreat to here and immediately flip it round and hit them, and they would walk straight onto it. First time, I'm not kidding, first time, every single time, that worked. Lindy Controversy, ladies and gentlemen. It seems that last month I uploaded a video that got some people a little bit confused and even irate, and so this video is not.
I know backpack color was working before, so I don't know what.
Which was about knife fighting, and it was in verse. Now it seems that a lot of reenactors and HEMA people have been a little bit upset because they've imagined, from what I said, quite wrongly, that I was saying that their hobbies, their pastimes, even their livelihoods were based on rubbish, and that I knew better, that somehow I was the world expert on knife fighting, which I'm not, and that I was saying that their contribution to the great debate, this debate we're all having, how did people fight in the olden days? That's essentially what we're all trying to work out, isn't it? That their contributions were rubbish. No, I was not saying that. Not only was I not saying that, I can't think of any reason why I would say that. I can't even think of any reason why anybody else would think that I would say that. Why would I say that? Why would I rubbish something when I've so publicly said that I actually do the thing? You know, I used to do loads of reenactment, don't do much now, granted, and I do HEMA. Okay, perhaps not as often as I'd like to, but I do HEMA, and why would I go to these classes if I thought that they were rubbish? Let me make it clear as well that I'm not saying that the standard of teaching that I've been given in Kung Fu, reenactment and HEMA and so forth has been substandard. No, it's been fine. I have no complaints with the quality of teaching. So I hope I make that absolutely clear. Now, some videos came out, one by Scholar Gladiatoria and another one by Thrand. There may be more, I don't know, but those are 2 that I've seen. Which took it a little bit further, and they replied to me, and so this is my reply to those replies. Now, why was my first video so amazingly misunderstood? Well, I think it's not a coincidence that it was the first one that I did in verse, and maybe the fact that it was in verse has confused a lot of people. Perhaps some of them, for instance, think that I felt so passionately about this. This was something that was close to my heart, and I had to get it off my chest, and that mere prose was not good enough, and that I had to therefore use verse to express the full passion that I had in me, that I was going to criticize people. This was about love and hate and right and wrong. Sing about stabbing with a passionate hand. But no,
I didn't want to sing about it, and nor did I feel, you know, so powerfully emotional about it that the only way I could tell you about how much I felt about this dagger fighting business was to express myself through the medium of contemporary dance. No, that wasn't it either. In fact, I didn't feel all that passionate about it, really. The reason I did it in verse is I'd written a few poems lately and I was sort of in the mood writing lots of verse, and I thought it'd be a lark. I thought it would be unexpected, and it seems that I was right on that score, to do one in verse, and so that's why I did it. Some people managed to watch the entire video without actually noticing that it was in verse, which is surprising. There's another reason. I think the fact that I did it in verse may have confused people, because when you do something in verse, people think that things are symbolic. I say verse rather than poem. There was no central metaphor. And it could be that people thought that these various objects that I was showing the camera symbolized more than themselves. They didn't. Some people, I think, thought that this dagger symbolized reenactment and everything that it stands for. No, it just meant to be like a late Romano British dagger. Obviously the real thing would come to a sharp point. This is a blunt one for reenactment fights. And some people perhaps thought that this symbolized the world of kung fu and Eastern martial arts, because I tended to hold it when I was talking about those things. No, really, it was just a sort of a shorter, slightly cuttier, perhaps curving blade. That's all it meant. And that this represented HEMA and all that HEMA stands for, all its truths and striving, and no, it just represented the rondo. That's all this represented. So when, for instance, I said, perhaps the choice of the rondel is wrong, which is one of the lines of the poem, I didn't mean HEMA is wrong. No, I just meant that in the context of the poem, which was a poem about what sort of knife would I use in a knife fight and how would I hold it? Essentially, if I'm having a knife fight with another guy today, what sort of knife would I pick? This is assuming that I've got a choice. We're both going to have a knife or a dagger, and I get to pick what sort of thing. I was just saying I'd pick something like this and I'd probably hold it point up. That actually was the message. But some people seem to think that it was pitting one source of information, one source of learning against another. No, that actually really wasn't what it was about. Now, Matt Easton has made a video. I've got the crib sheet here because I won't remember everything he said. Has made quite a lengthy video, although I think this one's going to be quite long, in which he put lots of counter arguments to what I said. Now, may I thank you, Matt Easton, for paying attention to me for the first place. I'm honoured.
It's weird that it was working before. I really don't understand how that red backpack stuff. Oh, I think it was only doing it when I had a default red thing. That's the only time I remember seeing the back colored.
But that's okay. You never descended to ad hominem attacks, which sometimes people in the comments of videos do, and you then presented argument, and that's all fine and good. It's all part of the debate we're having. How did people fight in the olden days? Now, you say that some treatises show the dagger being held point up. Yes, I know. I say that in the poem. I say that, I thought, quite clearly in the poem. They favour, by far, the downward or ice pick grip, is what I say. I don't say they use it exclusively, and I said the other way, it's true, the other way they don't exactly bar, I say, but they never showed the flick. They don't show, at least I'm unaware of a treatise which talks about how to change grip from one hold to the other. If there is such a treatise, do please tell me. So yes, I believe in one of your own videos, you said that it's about 80%, 20% in favour of the ice pick grip. I haven't actually counted myself, but that sounds about right to me, though I would have said 4/5. So yes, I know, and I said that, and so that's all right then. So far, we're in perfect agreement. Now you say, and Thrand goes a bit further with this, you say that it's a very good stab, and that's why people would do it. Yes, it's a very good stab, and yes, I know it is. And I say that very unambiguously in the poem. In fact, my exact words are, it's a good stab, I'll grant you. It's hard and downward and deadly.
and that's what you say it is. So again, it seems that we're in perfect agreement. Thrand, when he tested that stab against a thing that he could stab into, he found that that stab was slightly more penetrating. Although, I think we can agree, can we not, that a stab from a knife held this way into someone's body will also kill them. I mean, this handle is fit for purpose. You can kill someone holding a knife like this, and as long as that's the case, well, they're both handholds are fit for purpose. So again, I don't think we actually disagree. Now, you came up with a load of illustrations. Let's have a look at those illustrations there, because actually I would say that they back me up. They back up what I was saying rather well.
Yes, here we have a treatise showing men using the sword grip. So even the treatises show that this is a good way to hold a knife. And note that these men are unarmoured. As are these men. They're unarmoured again and going for the wrist, just as I said. Unarmoured again. And again. They're all unarmoured, in fact. And again, note, going for the wrist. That's an ice pick grip, so I don't know why you're showing me it. Aha, yes. That's an ice pick grip again. These are all ice pick grips, so I don't quite understand the point you're making, but they are still all unarmoured. Now, these are definitely unarmoured, and note, they're using a cutty, choppy, curving knife. And here, we see sword grip versus ice pick grip, and sword grip is winning.
Now, the verse I wrote was about a fight between two unarmoured opponents. Granted, I never actually clearly used the word unarmoured, but I thought from the poem it was pretty clear what I meant. But just to make it extra clear, I put that in the description of the video as well. But still, some people in the comments, and you, Matt, were saying, oh, no, this wouldn't work against someone who's wearing armour because XYZ. Well, it wasn't about that. I cannot, in a 4-minute poem, cover the entirety of knife fighting. It's just too big a topic. So I was talking about a knife fight between unarmoured people. I was limiting it. You always have to limit the scope of something. You cannot talk about every single possible combination. Similarly, I was not talking about a fight between someone armed with a knife or dagger against someone armed with something bigger like a sword or a halberd or a spear or whatever. It was just a poem about knife fighting and nothing else. So
yeah, there we go.
Myself. Now, you
Orange and white
about,
backpacks.
Stab to the armpit, at armpit height. And it's true that the poem didn't cover every possible stab, and that was one of the possible stabs that I didn't cover. And you're right, yes. And by the way, Matt,
the huzzah!
The camera, you made it look wicked. But yes, so you can stab at armpit height like that with one of these knives. Although it does actually still suffer from the same elbow exposure problem. If someone puts his hand there as you go into stab, you're in a disastrous position because not only has he blocked your attack, but he's also gained control of your arm and exposed targets. But of course, you're not going to open, are you, with that attack, are you? Because he'll see it coming and he'll block. So at an appropriate moment, you will throw that in. So perhaps you've got outside that arm, you've gone over the top, so now he's no longer in a position to put his hand here, and then you stab him wickedly in the armpit. Yep, that would work, and I would hate to be on the receiving end of that. But the poem wasn't a tutorial. It was a poem. I did it for a lark. Now, the grappling, that was the next thing. We talked about grappling, again, a bit beyond the scope. And yes, this does have certain advantages in grappling, although actually what I was talking about is the choice of knife a lot. And if you're grappling, getting really close with someone, a short, cutty knife is much easier to bring to bear than a much, much longer knife. If you're the closer you're in to someone, the better a short weapon is. So if you're going to wrestle with me, my having a short knife, and I can always turn it round, that doesn't take very long, and stab. So as I'm knife fighting out here, I could be holding my weapon this way, and then, oh, you're going to wrestle me, are you? Okay. I can always change. It was beyond the scope of the poem. What else? I have to refer to my creature sheet again. Stress. Okay, that was your next big point. Okay, this was way beyond the scope of what I was doing, but it's a very interesting point you make, Matt, about stress. Now, I'm a Lindy Hop teacher, and sometimes people book me for private lessons. And it hasn't happened yet, touch wood, but I do fear that one day a lady will come to me, book me for a private lesson, we'll dance, and she'll say, well, I want you to give me some pointers, help me improve my Lindy Hop, and we'll dance, and I'll think, wow, she's really, really good. I can't fault her.
And so I say to her, yeah, you're really good. Keep doing that. That'll be 50 quid. And she might go away thinking she didn't really get much value there. So similarly, if I went to a fencing master, a martial artist, and said, please, master, show me how to knife fight. And he says, right, grab the thing like a caveman and go, ah, stop, 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 keep stabbing, 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 let me see your war face, stab, don't stop stabbing, more stabbing, stab, 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 stabbity stab. I might think, is this guy really a martial artist? Am I paying money for this? I'm not going to come back if I think the next week it's going to be more stabbing. And similarly, if someone comes at me like that, I suspect that the best counter to that is not to go at him like that, because we'll end up both stabbing each other and it'll be horrible. We think, don't we, Matt? In fact, don't we all? You know, don't we think that technique,
back a second,
calmness, will bring out? If you teach someone how to stay calm and use moves to anticipate what the other guy's going to do, to close down his options and open up yours and counter in some refined way, does that not beat the guy who just comes at you like a bull at the gate? If this is actually the best way to knife fight, well then it's really easy to teach people to knife fight, isn't it? You just say, do that and keep doing it, and there's no defense against it. Only there is a defense against it. Now, if I were to go to a martial artist and say, please do tell me how to defend myself against various opponents, one of the opponents that it would be useful to defend myself against is the guy who just comes at me like that. And I would hope that he would be able to show me some techniques that would work. This is not the super all-defeating technique. If there were one super all-defeating technique, then there would just be that one in the treatises, because all the others would be a waste of time, and everyone would always have done that, and everyone would know it. If this one technique were the best thing, people today would they'd probably all know that.
He's talking about knife fighting meta.
Now the next thing you talk about is the knife against weapons. I've already mentioned this before. I'm not a great fan of this style of parrying. You have to, you're parrying very close to your own body, which I don't like, and you're leaving things to the very, very last moment. And it's very easy to, I find, to dodge around that, and it hits someone where his dagger isn't. I much prefer, if I do find myself against someone with a much longer weapon, which is not what my video was about, then I prefer to try to either get out of the flipping way and not be there, or parry them as early as possible. At the beginning of their attack, step in, and in which case a nice long blade like this would be better actually than this. So against an opponent with a sword, yeah, I would like a nice long blade, thank you very much, and wouldn't care too much to take him on with that. But that's a different situation.
Still can't figure out why the server is setting
close
as black to start with.
You say
it's the
that,
weirdest thing.
This is good for defense.
Unintentional.
Well, yes, although actually,
and this isn't working.
I find that if you're against someone who's not in armor, slashing like this
I didn't put
with
it on
an
here.
underarm is good for defense as well. And because you've got a little bit more reach, you can sweep a wider area. Fairbairn, in his manual on how to get tough in World War II stabbing with a commando dagger, he favors the underarm sweeping grip for defense. And in Kung Fu lessons, that's generally what we were told. You cut in defense and you stab in offense, and it's a system that's perfectly effective. It may not be the all-defeating system, but it is fit for purpose. It does work, and it's the one that I prefer. You say that both grips feature in history. I know we're entirely agreed on that one. And you, interestingly, right near the end of your video, you actually say quite succinctly my point. You actually say what the poem was saying. You say that in a knife fight between two unarmored men, where you have a choice of what sort of knife to go for, holding something like this way may well be the best choice. You actually say that in your video. So again, my word, we're agreed. We're so agreed, it's extraordinary. This could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. And you say that if a lot of people show in treatises it held this way, we should ask why. I agree, absolutely. We should ask why.
I guess
it doesn't mean that
when it's getting recreated.
It's the whole story.
But when it was getting recreated,
one shouldn't dismiss the people of the past simply.
Okay,
as
I got
idiots.
this.
Well,
I got this.
some of them were, and a lot of them were wrong. They believed all sorts of rubbish about medicine, but yes, they weren't all completely idiots. But I never said that. But there's more, because
someone has written in. Peter Reed has sent me this. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly though. It's spelled like this. But anyway, he says, in your recent video, you talk about the dagger fight, you do, of bar brawls and battles with a noble knight. You made some interesting points of which you should be proud. Oh, thank you very much. But I also want my say, and I'll say it out loud. Of course, I'll be saying it for you, Peter. A reply about dagger fighting. Dear Lindy, you say that a dagger should be held like a sword, not as an ice pick. You almost sound bored. Now, it's true that the sword grip offers much more reach, but come on now, we're talking about close combat in alleys, not some joust upon the beach.
Oh, right,
You
it
forgot
rhymes.
about other aspects of a medieval brawl, like grappling and punching, getting grotted by a shawl. If I were to fight you, I wouldn't just stab, I would make such a hassle, punch and wrestle, perhaps even kick your gonad. And when we're in that close with my dagger-eyed hook, this is historical, I know. I read it in a book. Now, you might say, well, with my reach, I could keep you at bay. To that, I have something to say. Perhaps you could keep me at arm's length away, but there's no way in Belgium at that distance I'd stay. I would close in real quick, give you a kick. With my ice pick grip dagger, I would make you stagger and bleed from your face, fall down in disgrace. The point has been made. There are many ways to hold a blade.
Nice.
Now, I hope this poem won't cause animosity to grow. Yes, just for fun, I really like your show. Oh, thanks. In fact, I almost feel like a fool, for all this has already been told by Mr. Matt Easton from the Gladiator School. Although I hope this was not a complete waste of your time, because Mr. Matt Easton did not even rhyme. There you go, eh, Matt? Ah, that's talk. Lindy Beige! I went to the National History Museum in Stockholm, and there I attended an exhibition. The Medieval Massacre! It was all about the Battle of Gotland, which confused me a little bit because I wasn't very familiar with the Battle of Gotland, but I did know about the Battle of Visby of 1361, and it turns out that for some reason they call the Battle of Visby the Battle of Gotland. Visby is a town on the island of Gotland, which is today a part of Sweden, and in 1361 the King of Denmark, Valdemar IV, invaded, and it is generally described as something of a one-sided slaughter. And on one side you have a professional army, lots of well-equipped mercenaries and so forth, and on the other side you have what are usually described as peasants and farmers and so forth, who had for a while been rebelling against the merchants of the Hanseatic League, who were in Visby, and who, according to some versions of events, actually shut them out of the town, didn't let them in the town, and just watched from the battlements, watched them get slaughtered by a considerably superior army. Oh dear. The merchants inside the town of Visby were paying 1/5 as much tax as the farmers living outside the town, so the farmers did have something to rebel about. Now, why is this battle so important? It's important because of the excavations that took place between 1929 and 30. It's a great shame that it wasn't excavated more recently, because our archaeological techniques today are so much better. Although, I dare say that when it was being excavated, the people then were saying, oh, thank goodness, this is a modern excavation. Can you imagine what a mess they'd have made of it 50 years ago? But hey-ho. So we have lost, unfortunately, a lot of evidence to rather antiquated excavation techniques. But it is extraordinary because we have bodies and all the stuff that was with them immediately after a battle, because the guys who were on the losing end and died all got just thrown into a few mass graves. Why was this? We don't know, but the front-running theory is that it was a hot period of weather and the bodies decomposed something horrendous, and people couldn't even bring themselves to salvage the scrap iron worth of the armour on them, and they just picked the guys up and just rolled them into a ditch holding their noses. It was that bad. That the bodies were not very thoroughly searched is evidenced, for instance, by this pouch of coins that was found on one of them. Now you would think, wouldn't you, that as you rolled them into the ditch, you would have heard a chink, chink, chink noise from all the coins, and someone would have said, oh, that one had a load of coins on him. And then perhaps someone else said, yeah, do you want to go into the pit after it and dig it out? Be my guest. And okay, fair enough, let's just leave the coins where they are. And it's interesting because we get to see an awful lot of stuff. We get to see what people were wearing in those days. Very few weapons were found. You can imagine that a weapon on the dead man would be dropped a lot of the time, so you could just pick those up and salvage those more easily. But armour, a lot of the armour was just left on the bodies. And it's interesting, this armour, for lots of reasons. The labelling in the museum referred to it as lamella. No, I wouldn't call this lamella. I would say that this is brigandine. There's lots of plates. They are, if you like, the centre of a sandwich. So you've got an outer layer of leather or canvas or some stout material, and an inner layer, and a rivet going through. And in between these plates, the rivet goes through the plates and holds it to the outer layers. But the rivets do not hold the plates to each other. So there's a certain amount of lateral flexibility. Although this is not very flexible armour. It's a cheap way of producing plate armour. Interestingly, you look at these and they're not very pretty. They're no two exactly the same. Some of them I felt looked quite Bronze Age, and as I said, they're primitive and ugly. And look at these sabatons. Now, yes, sabatons. We're used to seeing in museums.
I got it. I'm going to do
deconstructive
like rather than constructive.
And we think, oh wow, look at the craftsmanship back in those days. And yet, let's look at those sabatons again. It's just a few flat plates shoved on the top of someone's shoe. Now, it could be that we're missing an awful lot of this stuff from museums. You see, if you craft a spectacularly wonderful suit of armour, is anyone going to just, oh, we could reuse that for horseshoes. Bang, 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 there you go, horseshoe. I imagine that a blacksmith would sooner burst into tears than destroy a work of art such as these etched, fluted masterpieces that end up in museums. But imagine that someone has just, look, be honest, I just want to stay alive. You get a load of plates and stick them on me, and you end up with armour like this. Well, perhaps this is the stuff that did end up getting recycled into horseshoes, and that's why we don't see it in museums. So perhaps this is a rare glimpse of some of the lower status armour that was being worn, and it is valuable for that purpose. Certainly an awful lot of well-armoured men died, so armour on its own won't keep you alive. And some of the men on the losing side were decently armoured. Of course, we can't say for certain which of the bodies was on which side. They just all got rolled into the ditch. Now, I have to say, I did get a bit annoyed by the lack
if it's not
of
valid,
labels
rather than add them.
in this exhibition. A lot of things weren't labelled at all. Some of the labelling was, I thought, rather inaccurate. It was as though the curators of it consider themselves curating an art installation rather than anything designed to convey information to the public. I would extend this criticism to the entire museum, in fact. None of the cabinets had any information in them. You had to really go searching for information on little bits of paper some distance away, and even then you tended to get just one word or something. Helmet. Great. Oh yeah, do you know what? I guessed it was a helmet. I want to know a bit more than that. How old is it? Where was it made? Where was it found? How much does it weigh even? Give me some information. If I don't want the information, I don't have to.
I love this guy. Some shoes. This is a classic. Why are they playing this? Oh god, I don't want to know.
I've just had a rummage in a storeroom and have come across three pairs of authentic boots that I made many years ago. This is the first pair, and when they were new, they're rather stiff with age and neglect now, but when they were new, they were beautifully comfortable. I drew around my feet and made them exactly to fit my feet, and they had smooth, rather well stitched, though I say so myself, leather soles, and you can see a sort of brogue type thing. And I was very happy with them, and they were extremely comfortable. Unfortunately, I then joined a reenactment society and would be running around the woods, fighting each other and so forth, and I pretty quickly discovered the drawback of wearing authentic boots. Some people cheated. They wore inauthentic boots, and they were at a significant advantage in combat because smooth-soled leather boots, flat-soled leather boots like these, give you pretty much no grip on muddy ground at all. And the enemy only had to be deployed up a really quite a moderate slope. And if it was muddy, we'd just think, don't fancy it. I can't fight uphill up that slope. I'll be at such a huge disadvantage, having such a poor grip. Let's just march around somewhere else and force them to redeploy. I remember in one fight, for instance, I wasn't in command. The commander said, right, you and you are in the middle at the front, and you and you to the left, you deep scout, and Lloyd, you're a right flanker. Oh, thank you very much. So there I was on the right flank, and to my right was a very steep, quite small hill. And to my surprise, appearing at the top of it was a man in quite a lot of armour who said, and yes, he actually did say this, I am your nemesis. Anyway, he came charging down at me in, as I say, quite a lot of armour, and I thought, well, I'll just take a few steps over here and watch him go, wah, splat. Yep, that's pretty much what I thought. And then, of course, I had him. Of course, he was going to get it up almost immediately, so I had to rush in there and get him before he got to his feet. So I charged in, and I fell over as well. And then, of course, it was just a race, but whoever got up first won. And he fell over first, so he won the race because he had a head start. So, learn from this. If you're in a fight and it's inevitable that both of you will fall over first. I did notice that people with hobnails on their authentic boots did far better. Now, I've got this pair of five-a-side football boots, and they have these studs all over the bottom of them. You see roughly how many of them there are and roughly the size of them. And yep, that's pretty much what you do to a pair of authentic boots. Unfortunately, you can see I didn't work particularly well. The result was I then had far less pretty and far less comfortable boots, but they gripped to the ground. You could run about on earth and mud and not slip quite as badly as you otherwise would. And the reason they were so uncomfortable is that the hobnails, because it was a completed shoe, went right the way through the sole, and so on the inside, you can see on the inside
so if we're not a cart,
and so even though they're all turned round, it's still not a comfortable wear, these. So I made another pair, and reenactors among you will probably recognise this particular pair of boots from a Danish bog find, and this pattern is authentic and really comfortable as well. And this time I didn't skimp on the leather, it's good quality stuff, veg tan, and they've got a single piece of thick leather for the whole of the sole, which I then hobnailed, and then I attached the sole with its hobnails to the upper, so the upper doesn't have the tops of the hobnails coming through it. And so these are very comfortable and very grippy. Huzzah! Though obviously not very good with puddles. So now I had grip. That is to say, I had grip as long as I was running around in the countryside on earth. Because if you're on a hard surface, hobnails are really not very good at all. And soldiers right up until World War II were wearing hobnails and finding this out for themselves. If you run on a flat, hard surface, the hobnails that don't dig into the surface because the surface is too hard, skid all over the shop. And we have in the literature from Josephus's
Really, that's what I wanted. I want the items there. I just don't want all of the ones that I can't use.
A centurion who scattered all before him. He got into the city of Jerusalem, and any man who came close to him, he hacked down and put great crowds of them to flight, and he charged after them, and he got to the pavement in front of the temple of Jerusalem, and he ran onto the pavement and splat! Fell right on his backside, and those that he was chasing just went from, let's get him! And they mobbed him, and that was the end of poor Julian. And I can confirm that on hard surfaces, hobnails are not terribly good. I have my own Julian moment. There was a bridge over there that was being held by their best fighter, who was really good.
It's not valid now, so that makes sense.
Quite a lot of our guys trying to get past this one guy and failing. But I did so well. I did so well. I fought down the other side.
Damn it, I don't have enough containers. Let me build more.
And sending all those guys back there. And I then had enough room. I looked over my left shoulder. I then had enough room to dash for the bridge. I thought, right, I'll scare these guys off so they go back up. And then I'll run this way and I'll be too quick for them. I'll be too quick for them. I'll take that guy out on the bridge from behind. Whatever. Victory shall be ours. So I ran up to him. He was so dead. He was so mine. He was so dead. And I jumped down onto the bridge. Now the bridge was made out of wood. It was thick planking, very flush and smooth. And just for extra good measure, it was covered in a thin layer of wet leaves. Anyway, I jumped down onto the bridge and immediately it went, yeah! Crash! He, hearing a crash behind him, turned and with his spear went stab, and then carried on holding the bridge. And so there you go. Authentic boots. Smooth-soled leather is very, very comfortable, and loads of people wore it in the ancient world. But it gives you really almost no grip on earth and mud and so forth. And whereas if you're just being a farmer, that mightn't matter too much. If you're trying to fight in armor up a slope, it matters an awful lot. And Caligai, that's just the Roman for a hobnailed sandal. Caligai give you excellent grip, very much like a modern five-a-side boot on earth and so forth, but unfortunately almost no grip at all on smooth, hard surfaces. So for those of you running Dungeons and Dragons adventures or so forth, and you have people running from surface to surface at high speed, that's something you might want to take into account.
Lindy Mage!
This is your brain when you enjoy a sweet night's sleep on a Nectar mattress. This is your brain when you sleep on a regular mattress. While Nectar mattresses' unique technology provides you with a good, solid sleep, which is much needed for your brain to properly function. Not getting enough sleep can actually hurt your brain. Research proves that a lack of sleep lowers brain function, causing symptoms like inability to concentrate.
This is true stuff here.
Except
the medieval massacre bone. Perhaps the most gruesome exhibit in this exhibition was the bone.
There we go. Some nice topics there.
The medieval massacre exhibition had some reconstructions of armor found at Visby. These gauntlets were based on these finds, which, I hope you can see, belong to someone whose hands were far from small. I've said it before and I'll say it again.
I feel like it's removing it and then
such
not adding
thing
it
as
back
studded leather
to
armor.
default.
This is not studded leather armor. Studded leather armor is a fiction born of costume designers with low budgets and heavy metal rock band fantasy. This is plate armor, or possibly you might call it splint, where many of the plates are on the inside of the gauntlets and held in place by rivets. Studded leather wouldn't work. Another thing that amazes me is that some people believe that gauntlets had metal on the palms. No, it was just ordinary leather. You needed to be able to grip your sword properly and, just as importantly, to feel it properly in your hand. The articulation is fine, and they would double as quite effective knuckle dusters. Here you see the bassinet they had with male aventail. I certainly felt very protected in it. It was very solid. But the vision out of it was rubbish. I couldn't see up, down, or sideways at all. I could see forwards very badly, and that was it. The eye holes were far from my eyes. I also wonder whether we're missing something about these helmets. Was there really nothing holding the visor either up or down? It just flapped around, loose and annoying. The reconstruction aventail was riveted, which
there's no like
many
contains.
years ago. They didn't seem to make their mind up as to how to attach it, but I quite liked
only
to see
for
that
arrays,
it did have
but
some padding. I tried on the kettle hat, which is based on this one that they found, and well, it seemed to be a generous size. Mine is not a tiny head, and I would have demanded a second fitting from my armourer. It also weighed a ton, which made me suspect that the reconstruction used rather too thick metal. But the levitation control still worked. See? Elsewhere in the museum, they had a spectacled helmet from the earlier Viking or pre-Viking Vendel period. Good. Most of the actual archaeological examples have narrower eye holes than these, but even so, I have to say I approve of the way that I'm able to see what's around me, you know, stuff.
Alright, gonna clear options and then add the defaults at the beginning.
The black cap underneath it gave me Groucho Marx eyebrows, which I wasn't so keen on.
Then remove them
another go and yes,
if they're not.
Lindy
But then wait, if I
approved.
do that,
Yeah, see, I approve this. I can.
While I'm here, I'll show you something hideous that was lurking in the subterranean gold vaults.
if it clears it, is it gonna set it
This
again?
is the reliquary for Saint Elizabeth, made in many stages over several centuries, then looted by the Swedes in the 30 Years' War. It is hideous. This style of jewel decoration is called cabochon. The Carolingians loved it. Rounded, often irregular stones of many colours set in raised mountings. There's something about it that always makes me...
Let me just test by doing this. Just these two.
And workmanship in cabochon pieces can be mind-blowing.